Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special meeting of the City of Lebanon's Board of Zoning Appeals. This is a docket number that came up earlier this month, but had to be postponed until tonight for some legal reasons. We'll open with the roll call, please.
Gordon Perry.
Here.
Bruce Polly.
Here.
Ron Edwards.
Here.
Chad Kiger.
Here.
Lori Gross. Here.
Okay, we have everybody here tonight. I don't believe there's any old business to talk about, so we'll go right into the new business. One thing, this is a public meeting, and anybody who cares to speak will get a chance, but we need them to sign in with their name and address if they could, please. We're going to go with docket number 1822. Herman and Kittle Properties is requesting a conditional use approval to allow multifamily apartments. The properties are located at 603 West Main Street and 610 West South Street in Lebanon, and the properties are zoned NB, which is a neighborhood business. Ben, would you care to take over?
Good evening, board members. Thanks again for your willingness and flexibility to meet a second time this month. We were notified we had made an error on one of the property addresses in our notice, and that's usually a problem. So we needed to send out new notices and schedule a second meeting to make sure we could stay on the applicant's time schedule. So thanks again for that. To get into this a little bit, as Mr. Pauly stated, this is a conditional use application for multifamily. The properties in question are zoned neighborhood business. Multifamily dwellings are listed as a conditional use, which means that this board has the ability to review those before those uses would be permitted. So that's what we're doing here tonight. I'll let the applicant talk a little bit about their company, Herman and Kittle, and what they do as a company. The reason they are applying for this now is they are intending to apply for low-income housing tax credits at the end of July, and part of that application, they need to be able to show that from the local government's perspective that the use is permitted. So they needed to go through this conditional use process now before they made that application. If they are awarded, that notice of award would be towards the end of the year, I believe in November of this year. And at that time, then they would come back for site plan and development plan review and approval. So this is really just reviewing the use in general. We are not approving a site plan. We are not approving a building elevation, construction drawing. So while they have shown a conceptual site plan, it's very conceptual in nature. It doesn't include any survey or any civil drawings. It just shows how the building may lay out and how they might be able to provide adequate parking for those uses. But this is not a full development plan application at this time. So to just kind of the walk through conditional use, I'll let the applicant again, I'll let him go into a little bit more detail about the tax credit application, process for that, the requirements for that, and schedule for that. And then also from perspective of eligible individuals, who is eligible in a development like this based on low income requirements. I'll let them kind of walk through some of those things for you so you can get a better idea how that works. So I'll talk just a little bit about the project in general and then the conditional use requirements. So this is a 3-story apartment complex, multifamily apartment complex. It contains 54 units. The mix of the units is about 24 one-bedroom units and 32 bedroom units. So again, these are conceptually, this may change, but that's what they're applying for right now. This also includes the required 89 surface parking spaces as well as 7 indoor enclosed garage spaces. So they have just shown just very conceptually how that plan may lay out. As I mentioned, this is a conditional use approval, so we have to walk through that a little bit. And there are 6 conditions that must be met in order to consider conditional use approval. And I'll walk through each one of those criteria. The first is that the proposed use is listed as a conditional use for the particular zoning district. As I mentioned, this is neighborhood business zoning district, and per our use matrix in section 4.2 of the Unified Development Ordinance, multifamily is listed as a conditional use. Criteria number 2, the established maintenance or operation of the conditional use will not be determined to endanger the public health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the community. Applicant's proposal for multifamily housing will not be detrimental to the public health, morals, or general welfare of the community. The neighborhood already contains a mix of residential of all types and non-residential uses. The addition of new multifamily units will not cause any general public concerns. Criteria number 3, the conditional use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of the other properties in the immediate vicinity. for lawfully permitted purposes, nor substantially diminish or impair property values. The applicant's proposed project will not impair the use and enjoyment of other properties in the immediate vicinity or the property values in the neighborhood. The proposed use fits within the context of the surrounding community, and the significant investment will likely have a positive impact on surrounding values. Criteria number 4, the establishment of the conditional use will not impede or substantially alter the normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding property for permitted uses. The proposed development will not impede or substantially alter the normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding property. This multifamily community will be self-contained on the subject property. The site has access to 2 thoroughfares, including 1 state road for vehicular access, and will also be located directly on the proposed route for the Big 4 Trail on Main Street, connecting to downtown Lebanon, providing needed pedestrian facilities. This site is also in an area of transition to the east to more commercial retail-oriented uses, so this development will provide a good transition to existing residential neighborhood. Criteria number 5, adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and/or other necessary facilities have been or will be provided. All required utilities and transportation infrastructure is already provided to this infill site. The applicant will be required to meet all applicable drainage standards per the city's stormwater ordinance for infill development, which will be addressed once the applicant files for development plan review from the Planning Commission later this year or early next year. Criteria number 6, the proposed use is not in conflict with the goals of the comprehensive plan or the Unified Development Ordinance. The development, construction, and implementation of this proposed multifamily use is not in conflict with the City of Lebanon Comprehensive Plan or Unified Development Ordinance. The Comprehensive Plan identifies this corridor as appropriate for both commercial and residential uses. Staff recommendation and review of the requested conditional use for the allowance of a multifamily residential use in the neighborhood business zoning classification. Lebanon Planning staff recommends approval. And I will put this up on the overhead so we can refer to if needed. This is the conceptual site plan that they've proposed to us, which was included in your packet. You'll see that it's bordered on the south by South Street, State Road 32 on the north by Main Street. To the west, just off of the property here, is the O'Reilly Auto Parts, and then to the east you got a series of additional commercial uses, and I believe there's actually a small residential use there as well. So to the south and north are, again, primarily residential uses, but as you get further to the east, it does transition to more commercial retail uses as well. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Is the 7-bay garage part of the requirements?
For parking?
I realize it's parking, but is having a enclosed garage part of the, is it a requirement, or is it just something that they're providing?
I believe that they're just providing that. I let them go into more detail about that, but it does count towards their parking requirement, but that's something that they had provided.
What is, for the number, for the 54 units, what is the total number of spaces required? Do you know that?
They have 96 total required, 96 provided.
Okay.
With that, Ben, I'll go back to a question that I asked you earlier, and I recognize that you had pulled this information from GIS, but the right-of-way lines of the street and the property lines east and west, with the number being right at 96, if there's a big variance in those right-of-way lines, which I believe there would be to follow State Road 32, is that going to change the plan to where we're going to lose parking space?
I actually think where they're showing it right now is pretty consistent with where the right-of-way line is for State Road 32. Based on our GIS, I don't think it's going to vary much. So again, we'll get into those once we get into the survey.
Okay,
and
yeah,
come back later this year. But these are based on what's shown in GIS. So there is some variability to what it actually is, but it's pretty close. It should be pretty accurate.
And you did state that this is in compliance or in alignment with the comprehensive plan for what the city has along State Road 32, or what we would call the gateway?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ben. Would petitioner care to step forward, please? Give us a little more detail.
Sure. Thank you. And again, thank you for having a special meeting tonight. I do appreciate that. So I'm here today. My name is Mike Rodriguez. I'm a development director with Herman and Kittle Properties. I'm joined by Matt Harris from Herman and Kittle Properties, Lynette from Integrative Wellness, and Michelle from Youth and Family Health Network is here. So in kind of a partnership between the three organizations, we do have site control for the properties that Ben mentioned earlier. It is our intention to apply for low-income housing or rental housing tax credits through the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority with an application at the end of July. We're proposing 54 units of affordable housing or workforce housing at the location. You'd mentioned parking. I think actually what we're trying to do is along Main Street, they're providing the new rail trail. What we're going to do is put the front of the building along that rail trail, and although we won't have any commercial components to this, what we'd like to do is put all of our amenity space along the first floor along that trail to kind of give it the look of a mixed-use development. You'd also mentioned parking. There are some things we could do. We're actually probably down to 53 units now, so we got 1 unit less. There's also some raised gardens, some outdoor entertainment areas that we can actually convert to parking if we need to. So I think we do have a little wiggle room there to adjust that if we need to. Would it be helpful to go into the low-income housing tax credit program and provide details there?
It's up to you.
Okay.
I have a question. Do you have other units in Lebanon?
We do. So the Canterbury House is a Herman and Kittle owned and managed property. So, so the low-income housing tax credit program essentially incentivizes developers to go out, build market rate type communities, but offer lower rents. So in Boone County is one of the highest income counties in the state of Indiana. So I know we're saying low income and affordable, but the income limits, for example, for a 4-person household, they can't make more than $46,320 to be eligible to live here. And another example, for a 2-person household, you can't make more than $37,080. So there are income limits to live in this community, but given Boone County, they are relatively high income limits, and those do transition into rents as well. So the rents that we're proposing, when we subtract out the tenant's portion of utilities, for a 1-bedroom, it'll range anywhere from $434 to $869. And for a 2-bedroom, it'll range anywhere from $521 to $1,042. Yes, sir.
Are there age restrictions?
There are no age restrictions. It'll be general occupancy. So that a little bit about Herman Kittle. We are a national developer of both market rate and affordable housing. We've got about 140 units throughout the country in, I think, 15 states, and that translates to about 15,000 units throughout the country. So we are in the top 10 as far as developers in the nation. We're based out of Indianapolis. I live in Zionsville, so we're local. I'm the developer responsible for Indiana. I have counterparts in other states as well. So that being said, can I answer any other questions or go into more details?
The properties of which you mentioned nationally across the states, these are property, so your model or the company model is to build, develop, and retain these and not sell them?
That's correct. We've got about 140 affordable properties, and in our history, we have never sold an affordable property. We have one developer that does market rate communities. Those communities we will sell. We've done in Westfield, in Fishers, downtown Indianapolis. We have sold some of those properties, but we have never sold an affordable property. Our strategy is we have to keep this affordable for a period of 15 years. In fact, we have to go 40 years. But after that initial 15-year compliance period, we're eligible to go back to the state and request more credits to rehab this property. So that's kind of our business model. We'll develop these, we'll manage these. In some cases, we'll own it. In some cases, we'll have a third-party partner own this, like Youth and Family Health Network. But it would be our intention after the 15-year compliance to go through, request more tax credits, and rehab the building. But again, we've never sold an affordable property in our portfolio.
Is the property you're proposing here in the 50-some units, 54 units, is the entire property designed for low income, or is it a percentage of?
Correct. We do have some properties like Canterbury House that is a combination of market rate and affordable. this specific development will be 100% affordable.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Once again, at this point, being a public meeting, if anyone cares to speak one way or the other, please step forward. Yes, please.
Yeah, concerning Trail 4 there on
Need your
Main
name
Street.
and address too,
Oh, yeah.
please.
I have it listed over there too. Bill Reeves, 504 West Main Street.
Thank you.
And my wife, I missed a little bit earlier, so I may have missed something. I've been on the run all day. But my wife has a lot of her flowers. We live on the, it'd be the north side. I think it's the safe side. But she's worried that she's going to lose a lot of her flowers and so forth that she's worked so hard on. And are they going to do much widening of the streets in that area?
This doesn't have anything to do with the trail.
Oh, it doesn't?
No, this is only for this
Just a development?
development right here. You've got to go to planning.
Oh,
And-
I
and go
made
through
the
that.
wrong meeting, huh? It's been a long day.
Yeah, I don't want to say you're at the wrong meeting, but we're not discussing the trail at all.
Okay. That's what I come here for, but it's going on already at the other.
No,
at the
no,
courthouse?
I mean, they can, Ben, you want to answer a couple questions for him?
Address it real quick.
Okay. Thank you.
There isn't necessarily a meeting about the trail going on, but if you have any questions about the trail project, stop in the planning office during work hours or give us a call and we can answer those questions for you.
Okay. Now my wife she just said there's a meeting, 7 o'clock. Okay.
Sorry. You can stay, though. Anybody else care to step forward and say anything? Doing good. You?
Okay, Than Lennox, live at 320 West William Street in Lebanon. Wanted to ask the people from, that are doing the development, where's the state of Indiana get this money from?
Address that?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, so the state is given, is it $2.50, $2.75 per resident? So it's about $2.75 per resident in tax credits. So all in, I want to say the state of Indiana gets maybe $15 million in tax credits, somewhere around there. It's a very competitive process. So we would be one of 50 to 60 developers seeking out these tax credits. And that amount of tax credits will generate anywhere from 15 to 18 developments throughout the state. So there's about a 1 in 3 chance that we're successful. But essentially what happens is the IRS grants each state $2.75, and I could be wrong on that number, but it's roughly that, per resident. And they, instead of the IRS dictating what type of housing they need from Washington, I think in a good decision, they've allocated that to state agencies. So in Indiana, it's the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority. They receive these annual tax credits from the IRS, and through a competitive process, through a qualified allocation plan, they allocate these credits to developers to develop housing. So we're a relatively small company, so we could never use that many tax credits. So what we end up doing, what all the developers really do, is either sell these to a bank, a large bank, or a large insurance company. So in exchange for these tax credits that we're giving them to offset their taxable income, they're giving us tax credit equity or equity that goes into the deal. So when you think of a typical house, like when you go out and get a mortgage for a house, typically you've got 20% equity and 80% debt. Well, because we have to keep these rents affordable for 15 plus, anywhere up to 40 years, we kind of flip that. So we go 80% equity that comes in the form of these tax credits and 20% debt. So for a development like this relative to a market rate community, we've got much less monthly debt service so that we can afford, we don't need as much revenue from rents to pay the debt service, because really only 20% of our capital stack is from the sale of these tax credits. So right now it fluctuates, but we're seeing about 95 cents on the dollar that banks or insurance companies are paying for these tax credits. Does that answer your question?
Well, the simple answer is it's coming from us.
It's coming from yeah.
It's coming from us.
Correct.
Okay, so we're subsidizing their project. Now, you run the Canterbury out here by the interstate, right?
Correct.
Are we happy with that situation out there? That's just a question I have. I'm not, I used to rent and rent houses and apartments, and it was always caused a problem to be able to have a market rate because there's always this low-income housing deal that comes in. And depending on how it's run, sometimes it can be good and sometimes it can be bad. I don't know how well they run their stuff, but I've seen a lot that hasn't been real good. So that's the only thing that I'm bringing up is that do we want more of this stuff? The unfortunate thing about Lebanon, they say Boone County has the high income. Well, the problem is the bottom third of the county has the highest income. Lebanon, I think we're probably lead the Midwest in creating lower income families. That's a big problem. To be able to afford one of these apartments, somebody's got to be able to make, well, these may be a little bit lower, but to afford a $600 or $700 a month apartment, you got to make somewhere around $18 an hour. And there's a lot of people around here that don't make $18 an hour. So we need low-income housing, but that's too bad because we really need to find a way to get higher-paid jobs in the area. And I've been saying that for a long, long time, and nobody pays any attention to me. But tonight I decided to say something about it. So that's the questions I'm bringing up. Yes, it'll probably be a real nice project when it's all brand new, but maybe 5 to 10 years down the line, maybe not so much. I don't know, but that's what I wanted to bring up, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else care to step forward? We will close the public end of the hearing at this point. Any questions from would the applicants care to rebuttal Mr. Lennox's comments?
No, I would just say, I think, Canterbury House was built back in around 2010, so it's about 8 years old. I think I haven't heard many problems from it. I'll defer to Ben. I don't know if there's any major issues that come from it, but, I'd be happy to take you on a tour of it or talk to property management. I checked in with them. They haven't had any major issues that I'm aware of. But I'd be happy to comment on that further.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board?
For Ben? Through city ordinances and standards, which we seem to be in a better position over the last few years, we can control, we the city would have control on maintaining a standard for that time. I mean, the applicant has already told us that in 15 years, they're eligible for tax credits for refurbishing, but that in that 5 to 10 year period of time, we, the city, have processes and standards in place to maintain that, do we not?
Certainly, yeah. You can always, from a high level perspective, they have to continue to maintain building code in the buildings, both interior and exterior, but with our, I guess it's the unsafe building code. There's two components of that. One is, houses that are basically falling down. We address those, but there's also a section of unsafe building code that allows us to address maintenance where it may be deteriorating from the neighborhood if, gutters are falling down or shingles are off the roof or things like that. So we absolutely have the ability to be able to address any maintenance issues if they would come up.
in other standards and other materials and those types of things can be handled through the Plan Commission during the time of, I'm just looking for a
Yes.
confirmation from you that these are the types of things, has the opportunity to move forward, that we, the city, would have the opportunity to put some safeguards in here to maintain.
Yeah,
maintain
they've obviously shown you a conceptual plan and design for the building, but that's not at all the final design necessarily. We'll get into the details with them if they're awarded the tax credits and come up with a final design for the building, final design for the site, landscape plan, all those assorted items. So we'll definitely make sure it's a high-quality product for the city.
Okay. And then,
The other thing I will point out, it is in a thoroughfare overlay district that also has heightened standards, so the architecture will definitely be something we'll look at as part of that.
What about renters? Do they rent to anyone, even if they're like convicted felons or?
So generally, no. We have tenant selection criteria that would prevent anyone anyone on the sexual register list, anyone that has committed a felony, anyone that has done serious harm. I will say there is a component to this development that will be permanently working with specifically Integrative Wellness and Youth and Family Health Network. There will be a component, 25% of the units will be reserved for people that would be their clients. So for those, we relax some of the standards, but for the majority of the property, yes, we would have tenant selection criteria that would that are the exact same as our market rate properties. We use the same tenant selection criteria.
Can you tell us more about the partnership here?
Yeah, and I don't know if either you guys want to speak to it, or I'd be happy to. So as a group, we've been working with the Herman and Kittle Integrated Wellness and Youth and Family Health Network was selected as one of 7 teams to participate in the Permanent Supportive Housing Institute, sponsored by the Corporation for Supportive Housing as well as Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority. We just wrapped that up. So what we're trying to address here is the recidivism rate in Boone County. So people are leaving jail in Boone County, and the recidivism rate here is almost 80% compared to 40% at the statewide, the state average. So people are leaving jail, they have no place to go, they end up going back in a week or two. So what we want to do for at least these 13 units, which will be integrated into the entire community, is to provide people an opportunity where they can have permanent residency along with permanent supportive services to break that cycle of recidivism.
Will be known as a halfway house?
No, it won't be like that. It won't be a transitional housing. This will be an apartment. They will pay rent.
Okay.
But they're dealing with substance use issues. So instead of having them on the street or having them back in jail or living on someone's couches that may be a bad influence, they would be a resident, a tenant here, where they would be able to provide, where we will provide on-site services for them in the community. So we'll put a physician's room in there. We're going to put counseling rooms in there as well. But it's really trying to break that cycle of recidivism and give people another alternative to go that are dealing with this substance use disorder.
So it's drugs or alcohol? Or
It could be either one, yeah.
could be either one.
Yep. And really
But just those two things? Substance?
What else? Yep, please. She's the expert on this side of the house. So.
Hi, I'm Michelle Standiford with Youth and Family Health Network. I'm the executive director. And having lived in Boone County all my life, and I sold real estate here for 20 years. And one of the things that attracted our organization to this development is the fact that we can we have several families that are facing affordability of homes. They have jobs and they're out here in our industrial parks and fairly good paying jobs, but as their families grow, they're not able to afford the higher rents, let's say. And some of these people are people that have cycled through jail or they've cycled through addiction. Some of them are not. Some of them are just people that are trying to make ends meet the best way they can. Today we were part of what's called a Region 8 housing. What's it called, Region 8?
Continuum of care.
Continuum of care. So, and a lot of people don't realize this, but there's different regions within the state of Indiana. In our region is Madison County, Hendricks County, Boone County, Hamilton, Hancock maybe. Anyhow, this is they had earlier in the year the homeless count, okay, for all of Indiana. They did it on one day. So today we get to see the results of that. I think that they had been released earlier. But one thing that really struck me was the fact that 2 years ago, the number of individuals homeless in Boone County was like, actually it was 2014. So 4 years ago, in 4 years, it has multiplied times 3, the number of people in Boone County that are homeless. But in addition to that, the number of families. So first they look at individuals, then they look at how many of those are actually families. One of the things that we learned in the Supportive Housing Institute that we were provided the opportunity to participate in is throughout our state of Indiana, people don't realize that there are many kids living in family units that have no place to live during the day. Hamilton County, for one, has 674 children living in homelessness. Now, Boone County is not near that bad, but there is a concern. So bringing affordable housing to Boone County, we see it all the time, the number of people trying to get into what they call the coordinated entry system, to where you get qualified to be able to get housing vouchers and things like that. There was a 2-year waiting list, is what we found out today. And that's for Section 8 housing type things. So this is to provide affordable housing. 13 of those apartments would be targeted and set aside for people that are facing homelessness or at risk of homelessness that have had problems with substance abuse in the past. The other 75% would be typical affordable housing units that our local families that you see at the soccer field and things like that that are trying to make ends meet would be able to apply for those because their income is not high enough for their debt. It's like the 40% AMI.
Didn't you just open a house on East Superior Street yourself?
That is a transitional house. That is for women transitioning out of incarceration. This is permanent housing, and it's not transitional living. Not the same.
Okay.
No, this is some place where people can come, they can live forever if they want to. These are homes, and it helps them. So let's say, as an example, here's how it could very easily work, is so people leave, it doesn't necessarily, but let's say those 13 apartments that we've set aside for people facing homelessness and substance abuse. So maybe they have came through our Ohana house, or maybe they've came through Men's New Life Recovery, and they're like, where do I go now? Because to go get into an apartment lease or a house lease is almost impossible. Having sold real estate here for 20 years, I will testify that it is extremely hard to lease apartments from individuals. We get to help design the lease agreements so that it works well for the people that need affordable housing. They don't face eviction because of things that normally somebody else would evict them for. And
So are you going to be part of this unit, this 54 unit, these 13, and you're going to have a, I don't know if you're going to have a psychologist there or someone there to help?
okay, so Lynette?
Will it be in-house?
Yes. So what supportive housing does, and it's different than transitional housing, so there's people that work night shifts and things like that, and they can't get to their medical provider during the day, or they work during the day and they can't get to their medical provider at night, or maybe they need mental health help, but they don't have transportation. They don't have a way to get back and forth. So within this property, we are then able to bring to them a mental health office, with them hospital, perhaps bring a medical exam room, a business development center to where we can help them through Workforce One, get resumes together, find work, life skills classes, places for them to hold meetings. And yes, some of them will be on site, some of them will be off site. The supportive services part will be provided through Youth and Family Health Network and Integrative Wellness, We would also be utilizing other county not-for-profits such as Love Inc., the Carrying Center, and places like that, just to bring all the possible wraparound resources we can to help. And it's not just that those services are only for the 13, it's for anybody that lives within that complex. So it could be people that really don't have a problem with substance use, but they can't afford $900 a month rent and their 3 kids and all those things. So we would help link them to where do you go for food stamps, and we help them navigate through that, and we're there on site to help them.
Free.
That's right. Yeah, it's all worked into the budget that we agreed to in partnership with Herman and Kittle. Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess 2 things I just want to add. Michelle's transitional housing, correct me if I'm wrong, but at the end of a year, they have to leave. They cannot stay there longer than a year.
Yeah, only stay up there for up to a year.
So the question is, and a lot of people that go through recovery, it takes much longer. It takes several years. So the question is, after that 1 year, that's great. That was an emergency shelter that somebody could go to. But at the end of that year, oftentimes people are still struggling, or they're not. I don't know if they're ever healed, but so this gives someone an opportunity to transition out of that transitional housing into something more permanent, and that's why they call it permanent supportive housing. There is no end dates. The housing and the services will be there for as long as they need it to recover. The other thing I wanted to mention is it really is going through this institute kind of made me realize, and I have some statistics on my computer, but the other cities that have incorporated this, really it's had a great impact on reducing public costs. So, but for this housing, you have people that have substance abuse issues that are going to the emergency room, that are going through the justice system, the probation office, police runs. What this is really intended to do is be more of a preventative program, I would say, to kind of head this off before it becomes a visit to the emergency room or a 6-month stay in the county jail. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to give people options to, get on the right path, as well as try to save some of the resources for the county.
Thank you. One last question for the applicant, yes. When I was preparing for tonight's meeting and reading through the planning staff's report and such, the word subsidized kind of jumped out at me, and I didn't really know the definition, and I did some research. So just confirmation, the subsidy is between your development firm and the state. You're not asking for tax abatements from the city of Lebanon, correct?
No, we're not asking for anything from the city or the county. It's subsidized in form. A lot of people see affordable housing and they throw it all into one big bucket, and that includes Section 8, HUD Section 8, as well as the rental housing tax credit program. The subsidy that we're talking about is in the form of tax credits up front. So that's our initial equity to build the development.
And that's between you and the state. That has nothing to do with the development in the city.
Correct.
That's all I wanted to have confirmation of.
Yep. No resources from the city or the county.
Good.
Any other questions? Once again, this is conditional use only. The construction and all of that's on down the road, and I'm sure you'll have to be back for part of those items. There's no other questions. At this point, I would take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the conditional use requested to allow multifamily residential use in the neighborhood business zoning classification.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Kelly, would you call roll again, please?
Gordon Perry.
Aye.
Bruce Polly.
Aye.
Ron Edwards.
Aye.
Chad Kiger.
No.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
Okay, motion passed 4-1. Congratulations and
Thank you all.
good luck.
Thank you. Keep you updated. We'll be back for site plan approval.
Okay. Do we have any other business to talk about? I'd take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second. Okay, got a motion and a second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned until July the 2nd.